Welcome to this lecture on evolutionary biology. Today, we are diving into one of the most fascinating topics in nature, sexual selection. Imagine walking through a jungle and spotting a male peacock with its massive, brightly colored tail. From a pure survival standpoint, that heavy, highly visible tail seems like a terrible idea. It makes the bird slow and easy for predators to catch. So, why would nature ever allow such a seemingly foolish trait to exist and be passed down? By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why. To answer the puzzle of the peacock's tail, we have to rethink what success means in nature. Surviving a long time means absolutely nothing if you do not pass on your genes before you die. This brings us to the core idea of our topic. While standard natural selection focuses on traits that help an organism survive its environment, there is another layer to the game. The ultimate prize is not just staying alive, but actually winning the chance to reproduce. This is where sexual selection steps in, changing the rules of survival. Now that we understand the importance of reproduction, let us formally define what this process is. In evolutionary biology, sexual selection is defined as a specific type of natural selection. However, instead of operating on traits that help an organism find food or escape predators, it operates exclusively on traits that increase an organism's mating success. It focuses entirely on traits that help an organism secure a mate. This powerful evolutionary force explains why animals develop characteristics that might actually make their daily survival much harder, but guarantee they leave behind more offspring. Understanding this definition leads us to look at how this selection actually happens in the wild. Sexual selection generally takes two distinct forms, and the first is called intrasexual selection. This occurs when members of the same sex, which are usually males, physically compete with one another for access to females. Because only the winners get to mate, evolution strongly favors traits that help win these physical battles. Over generations, this intense competition leads to the evolution of natural weapons, such as the massive horns on a ram or the heavy antlers on a deer. While males fighting is one way to secure a mate, the second form of sexual selection is quite different. This is known as intersexual selection. Instead of physical combat, this happens when members of one sex, usually the females, choose their mates based on specific attractive traits. The females act as the judges, and the males must put on a show. This female choice drives the evolution of beautiful but burdensome ornaments, just like the peacock's magnificent tail or the complex, energy-draining songs of male songbirds. The males are essentially advertising their genetic quality. These two forms of selection we just discussed perfectly explain a very common phenomenon in nature. Understanding sexual selection is absolutely crucial because it explains the existence of sexual dimorphism. This is the physical difference between males and females of the exact same species. Without this concept, biologists would be completely unable to explain why male lions have heavy manes while females do not, or why male birds are brightly colored while females are camouflaged. In the real world, understanding these differences helps conservationists manage endangered species and ensure that captive breeding programs are actually successful. Now that we know what sexual selection is, let us look at the mathematics behind these evolutionary trade-offs. Fitness is not just about living a long time. It is the product of how long you live and how many times you successfully mate. This brings us to our fundamental formula. W equals V times M. Here, W represents the total evolutionary fitness of an individual. V stands for viability, which is the probability that the individual survives to reproductive age. Finally, M represents mating success, or the average number of offspring produced. If a flashy trait decreases viability, V, but massively increases mating success, M, the total fitness, W, can still increase. Before we move on, let us see this formula in action with a concrete example. Let us compare two male birds. Bird A has a short, dull tail. He has a high survival probability of 0.8, but only attracts enough females to produce 2 offspring. We calculate his fitness by multiplying 0.8 by 2, giving a total fitness of 1.6. Bird B has a heavy, brightly colored tail. His survival probability drops to 0.4, but he produces 10 offspring. Multiplying 0.4 by 10 gives a total fitness of 4.0. Because 4.0 is much higher than 1.6, the massive reward in mating success completely outweighs the survival risk. This mathematical result we just calculated can be visualized perfectly in this diagram. Look at the horizontal axis, which represents the size of a male trait, like tail length. The vertical axis represents probability and fitness. The blue line shows survival probability, which steadily drops as the tail gets longer and heavier. However, the red line shows mating success, which rises sharply with a longer tail. The dashed green curve is the product of these two lines, representing total evolutionary fitness. Notice how it forms a peak in the middle? That peak is the optimal trait size, where nature perfectly balances the cost of carrying a heavy ornament against the massive benefit of producing more offspring. Now that we have visualized intersexual selection, let us shift our focus back to intrasexual selection, where males physically fight. In species like elephant seals, this type of selection drives the evolution of massive body size, simply because larger males win the physical contests and get to mate. But how do biologists actually measure the strength of this evolutionary force? To measure how strong this selection is, biologists calculate something called the selection differential. By calculating this value, we can quantify the exact evolutionary pressure that is pushing a species toward larger and larger body sizes over generations. This concept of measuring evolutionary pressure brings us to our second formula. The selection differential, denoted by the symbol S, is calculated as mu breeders minus mu population. Let us break down these symbols. S represents the selection differential, measured in kilograms. The symbol mu breeders represents the mean weight of the males that successfully mate. The symbol mu population represents the mean weight of all adult males in the general population. By subtracting the population average from the breeder average, we see exactly how much the mating males differ from the average male. A large positive number means strong pressure for larger size. Let us apply this formula to a real population of elephant seals. We are given that the average weight of all adult males in the population is 1,500 kilograms. However, only the largest males win the beach fights. The average weight of these successful breeders is 2,200 kilograms. We substitute these values into our equation, subtracting 1,500 from 2,200. This gives us a final selection differential of 700 kilograms. Physically, this massive positive number means the reproducing males are 700 kilograms heavier than average. perfectly explaining why these seals have evolved to be gigantic. We have covered a lot of ground today, so let us summarize the key takeaways. First, sexual selection is a powerful force that prioritizes reproductive success, sometimes even at the expense of an individual's day-to-day survival. Second, we saw how this takes two forms: males fighting for dominance, or females choosing beautifully ornamented males. Third, we learned that nature is always balancing the mathematical trade-off between viability and mating success. You now understand why nature often favors the bold, the beautiful, and the bizarre. Remember, in the grand game of evolution, reproducing is just as critical as surviving.